What's going on, everyone? It is the Durf, and my Banner Titan is back for more. This time, built a little bit differently with a sword and some Stronghold exotic gauntlets. So if you guys have been looking for a way to build a new Banner Titan that maybe isn't the stereotypical Banner Titan that can still help your fire team get through endgame activities and take the heat off of all your allies while dealing huge amounts of burst damage and looking ridiculously cool doing it, this is the build for you. You're going to be able to generate a bunch of orbs of power, be able to absorb and reflect damage, be able to take out all the champs that you could possibly come across, and basically be indestructible and unkillable. In the right hands, this build is extremely deadly. So this build is a ton of fun, was a ton of fun for me to create for you guys. And I hope that you guys can incorporate more Banner Titan into your life because simply it is just that much fun. So if you guys do find anything helpful in this video, please consider liking and subscribing or sharing with a guardian you know would love this build. This one, again, extremely fun. So let's get on into it. So we got the Berserker Titan subclass. Our super, of course, is Blade Fury. You can use it by performing a leaping slash towards nearby targets, severing them on hit and dealing bonus damage to suspended targets. Each successful hit briefly increases your attack speed and grants energy for your heavy attack. Or the other way, unleash a heavy upward slash, creating 2 suspending projectiles that seek out targets. My personal favorite is to unleash the 2 upward slash suspending projectiles first and then diving into them with the alternate attack. For abilities, we're going to go with Rally Barricade for its 38-second cooldown. I prefer the Strafe Lift just because I like to move as fast as possible. The Frenzied Blade, of course, everyone's fan favorite. And for this build, we're going to go with the Grapple Grenade. I am not concerned about getting Threadlings to do my bidding for me, as this is going to be a pretty melee heavy class, whether I'm using weapons or I'm using abilities. Either way, I want to be up close and personal with all enemies. For aspects, Banner of War, of course, makes another appearance. Defeat a target with a melee attack, finisher, or sword to raise a Banner of War that pulses with energy, periodically healing nearby allies and increasing melee and sword damage. Targets defeated by you and nearby allies charge the banner, increasing the speed of its pulses. Now, because we're going to be using a sword to draw enemy attention, this is going to pretty much max out our Banner of War almost at all times, especially in busier activities. Sometimes, depending on what lost sector you're in, for example, it may be a little bit more slower moving. However, any damage that you do with the sword that kills an enemy will get you the Banner of War raised anyways. And of course, since it's going to be a melee heavy ability type attacking character, we're going to be constantly doing things that are hopefully going to charge it, even if we need to pick off enemies from a distance. Our second aspect might be up for debate, but me personally, I don't think it is. Dranger's Lash. Activate your barricade ability to create a ripple in reality that travels forward along the ground, suspending and damaging the targets it hits. This is incredibly useful to give yourself a break. And also be able to take advantage of your barricade. In other classes, as far as the Titan goes, the barricade can take on different forms, but of course in this season, the arc barricade is going to be the most popular because of the bolt charge. This is probably next up on the list as far as barricades that I like. I like this better than the stasis barricade that can turn into stasis crystals. And honestly, the solar one, if we had some solar love, I think that might be tied with this one, the Berserker class. But that's it. You know, otherwise your barricade is just a barricade. I don't want to say it's boring because it serves its purpose well, but having something like Dranger's Lash, especially in sweatier activity, when you get into the face of enemies and maybe things are getting a little bit overwhelming and you'd like a break to be able to switch from your sword to your weapon, to deal maybe quicker damage, or you don't want to be blocking for a second, or maybe it's a champ. Activating Drunger's Lash is going to be able to suspend all the champs, mini bosses, things like that. It won't suspend things like bosses. Clearly it's made for rank and file opponents, but it is a very underrated. And maybe if you're watching this video and you're like, well, it's not underrated. I think it is underrated. I think Drunger's Lash should play a bigger part in every Banner Titan's life, to be quite honest. And with the Stronghold build that we have, I think it's even better now because you have a way to redirect damage, and now you can suspend targets on top of, everything else you're going to be able to do with this class. So I think it's a win-win. For aspects, Threat of Warding, number 1 on the list, picking up an Orb of Power grants Woven Mail. -10 to Resilience, which is kind of a bummer. So hopefully you got a mod your armor, or hopefully you got good modded armor that the -10 doesn't affect you. But if it does, just throw on the Resilience mod to make up for the 10. We'll get to stats here in a second. Threat of Transmutation is number 2. While you have Woven Mail, weapon final blows create a tangle, +10 to Strength. Of course, we're going to be using strand weapons here, so this is only fitting. But honestly, any weapon final blow is going to create tangles. The key here is because we're going to be pairing this with strand weapons on and off. Your tangles can sometimes be threadlings instead. So either way, you win and find additional ways to deal damage. Next up is going to be Thread of Rebirth. Strand weapon final blows have a chance to create a threadling. This is going to pair with our Stronghold guard. All the final blows that you generate while blocking and redirecting energy are going to have a chance to create a threadling. And when you pair this with the artifact, which we're going to go over here in a minute, it's, arguably even more potent of a perk. Well, fragment, I guess I should say. Last but not least, Threat of Generation. Dealing damage generates grenade energy, -10 to Discipline. This one might be up for some debate, but honestly, the grenade energy that you generate just from damage alone, I think is more than worth, 1/4 of your fragment selections. I know that we're not super heavy on relying on our grapple grenade, with this type of a build. Ordinarily, I would say that might be the opposite, especially for, other characters as well, Warlock and, of course, Hunter. But in this instance, the grenade regeneration damage, I think, is better than anything else you could put on here. Of course, you could substitute this for like Threat of Evolution. Threadlings travel far, deal additional damage. You could also possibly go with Threat of Propagation. Powered melee final blows grant your strand weapons unraveling rounds, but we're not using a rapid fire strand weapon anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And then some might say, well, Threat of Isolation, that's a staple in most strand classes, isn't it, Durf? Well, yes, but again, we're going to be running around guarding with a sword, so we're not going to be landing rapid precision hits, so we're not going to be able to take advantage of the Severing Burst anyways. Other than that, there's other options you could probably take. Defeating suspended targets grants class ability energy. That might be a good one to substitute for Threat of Generation. But I mean, are you really worried about that? I mean, that's a 38-second cooldown. I don't really think you are. I think the 4 that we have here are going to be able to pair and team up with virtually everything that we're trying to do with this build. For armor stats, you want to focus first and foremost on resilience, then strength, and then try to split the rest of your energies up between discipline, discipline, recovery, and intellect, with the least of the focus on intellect. Because it's roaming super, we're going to be able to regenerate our super quickly, given how much damage we're going to be able to take from being directed at our allies, which means that while we are guarding with our sword and redirecting it at enemies, that's going to be generating our super bar stupid fast. So just keep that in mind. You want to have it at like a T3 minimum, but I think a T4 might be kind of the sweet spot. It's not at the base level, so you're automatically going to grant yourself a little bit additional bump to your cooldown. You want to have your recovery, I would say, at minimum at T5. The reason for this is While you're guarding, you do have the ability to recover health. So if your recovery is at like a 2 or a 1 or even a 3, yes, you're going to be able to make health recovery eventually. But in a busier activity, if you are kind of in the heat of it and you are going to be switching out and in from your sword on a regular basis, depending on if you're dealing with ranged enemies or melee enemies, not having your recovery where it should be, it could be the difference between you getting half your health back and you dying as soon as you swap from your sword. And of course, your grenade. The T5, T6, T7 is probably the sweet spot. Ideally, you'd like to have a T10 in resilience, discipline, and strength for every Titan class, but that's just not realistic. And you're really not hurting for energy anyways. It's a 1 minute and 22-second cooldown. Plus, you've got the fragment here for additional grenade energy. So even if this was, let's say, at a T4 for discipline, you're not really going to be sitting there going, man, if I only had my grapple grenade, we could probably get through this, activity. You're never going to be thinking that. So just keep it kind of in the mid-range, 4, 5, 6. Spread it out however you like between those three stat categories, but make sure you kind of spec into strength and resilience, because of course you want to have, your melees recharge as fast as possible, and you want your barricade to be able to charge as fast as possible as well. For weapons, I'm going to go over immediately what I have on the screen, and then I'm going to go through a couple of substitutes that you could do for each slot. My current lineup features Tinashe's Mastery, Le Monarch, and Abyssal Edge. Abyssal Edge is going to be what we're going to be maining. We're going to be using the Stronghold exotic armor to guard with this. The perk flash counter, if you have somehow missed my first 2 videos, first of all, go out and check them, because I do go through this on 2 other elemental classes. But flash counter, blocking damage after raising your guard emits a short range blast that disorients targets. Ammo reserves are increased. You see my ammo capacity in the lower right hand corner is 70. That is legit. So what you are going to be focused on is how much damage you can generate while you are guarding with this flash counter. An easy way to add additional tick damage to your flash counter is to pair it with something like Surrounded. This weapon gains bonus damage when 3 or more enemies are in close proximity. Now, there's certainly debate on what should be in column 4 here. I personally like Surrounded. There's going to be other people out there that tell you to put, redirection on. I forget what the other one is off the top of my head, but basically, if it complements this flash counter, you're gonna be okay. So even if you've been farming another activity and you don't have Surrounded or anything that you really like, just having flash counter will get you in the conversation of what we're trying to do here, and use the knowledge that you have to kind of try to number one, get used to this style of play, because it's not something you can really do anywhere else except on Titan in general. And if you aren't like a huge Titan lover, if you just occasionally play Titan, this could be an easy ease in and ease out type of build that you can pair with a variety of elements. Like I said, check the other 2 videos that I have. They're the last 2 videos that I did before this one. And, get used to how you can make the Titan your own, even if you're not super used to it. But none of this is going to be, earth-shattering for the savvy veterans out there. But flash counter is the one you want. Of course, Xur also offers swords that have this, perk as well. But I think Abyssal Edge is going to be probably your best one. And given the bump to strand that the artifact has, this is probably going to be the only one you want to use. The only one I would recommend to substitute for Abyssal Edge would be the Lament. And that's probably it. There's not, in my opinion, I like the wave frame. To my knowledge, there's no caster frames for the heavy slot that can roll with flash counter. So you're kind of limited to what, you can do. And honestly, the wave frame just looks really cool in my opinion. So get yourself an Abyssal Edge, spec into it, get your Stronghold, and then move on from there and build around it. For the energy slot, I 100% recommend Le Monarch with the bump to Void here with the artifact. and the intrinsic ability to stun overloads, as well as its fantastic tick damage. And because the Nether Arena has virtually no health regeneration unless you're picking up orbs, having a weapon that has unrelenting as its catalyst or just intrinsically built into it is going to take you pretty darn far. So I wouldn't normally say, yeah, you should main a combat bow for obvious reasons. But Le Monarch really does put in work. And when you're sitting behind your barricade, yeah, no, it's not the fastest firing weapon out there, but you're really going to be guarding for clearing out ads anyways. So Le Monarch pairs perfectly with this, because if you've got those snipers up on the ledges and you're just kind of taking damage, or your allies are taking damage from far away, you can bust out Le Monarch, fire off a couple of shots in a couple of seconds, and get back to being the center of attention so your allies can keep doing what they need to do. Tenacious Mastery is what I'm currently rocking. I will give you a tiny caveat to this. The chill clip is still bugged for this weapon. It doesn't always trigger stunning all the champs. So if you happen to find yourself in this situation, which I've had people hit me up and say, hey, Durf, why aren't you rocking Tenacious Mastery all the time? Well, because Chill Clip as a perk has sort of a bug that's kind of known, but Bungie hasn't directly addressed it. Recently, in the most recent reset here last Tuesday, they did make a note about sidearms not doing what they're supposed to do. So if you haven't checked that out for verification, make sure you go look at that. So it's not affecting everyone, but Tenacious Mastery still makes the list, because as long as you're not firing at a champion that has a shield, like a physical shield, you'll be fine. It's when you get up to enemies that have shields just intrinsically built into them, whether that's some of the Taken or that's some of the Cabal. Now, I did do some testing, and I found that certain Cabal, for whatever reason, I was able to shoot through their shields no problem with this. Others, I was doing 0 damage, and I was not, chilling them at all. So if you do find yourself in that situation, you might have to switch to another sidearm. Not because Tenacious is not OP right now, because it is, because theoretically it can stun all 3 champions. It's just because, for whatever reason, it falls off after you play the game for some time. Again, this is not for everyone. This is just certain, unlucky people. So if you do find yourself trying to clear that expert sector and Tenacious is not doing what you need it to do, you're going to have to back out, reformulate your plan, and then go back in with your alternate weapon. So speaking of alternate weapons, if Tenacious is not cutting it for you, you can certainly spec into the Call or Mikkel's Reverence. Certainly the Call from, the Pale Heart, Mikkel's Reverence, of course, from Root of Nightmares. Those would probably be the 2 sidearms I would recommend, unless you want to spec into an exotic sidearm like Final Warning. But that's going to have to be kind of a niche decision on your part, because I don't really think it's going to flow very well with your style of play, but I could be wrong. I would prefer the Call or Mikkel's. Mikkel's, of course, fires at 450, so that pairs nicely if you've got to do a quick little burst. It also has Hatchling. And, of course, the Call, you can roll it however you want. Demolitionist, Hatchling, Beacon, Vorpal, Beacon, Hatchling, Demolitionist, Vorpal. We really can't go wrong. It's got the Dealer's Choice perk as well, so you get a little bump back to your super. But those 2 are what I'd recommend for barrier alternates if you're finding that your Tenacious is having problems keeping up. If you need to stun unstoppable champions and you don't want to use your barricade to do so, which is what I'm recommending you use your barricade for, unless you know that you're not seeing any, then use it whenever you want. Put on the scatter signal. Overflow and controlled burst. It's still one of the highest DPS instant burst fusion rifle DPS options that you can do. It stuns unstoppable champions virtually in 1 or 2 shots with it, whether you're in master or expert level type activities. If you're just running general content and you really like the chaos, put on Rufus's Fury with Demolitionist and Hatchling and just go crazy. Use your sword in between takes with Rufus's Fury while you're waiting for it to reload or whatever, if you've got reconstruction on it. Either way, you can't go wrong. For substitutes for Le Monarch, if you are looking to stun overload champions and you want to stay with Void, I recommend putting on Chronophage. You can put on repulsor brace and destabilizing rounds and clear out a room of enemies in virtually no time. You can also put this on an overload champ, and because it is a special ammo weapon, it will stun them pretty darn quickly, even if it is not a surge for the activity that you're running. If you want to do something like stun an unstoppable champ and you want to use a void weapon, I highly recommend the Gravitic Arrest from the dungeon. Unrelenting chain reaction. There's a lot of great options for perks for this, but if you've got one and you haven't messed around with it, it does handle very well, despite you seeing it being a 30 in handling. And it's pretty darn accurate. You know, stability is at 65, recoil is at 70. It's not really that hard to keep on target, but this will help you with the unstoppable champs. Now, if you want to get weapons that are going to stun barriers, the Lotus Eater is quickly making its way up the chain of people's favorite weapons for the sidearms. There's not really a lot of competition, to be honest, for Void sidearms, so the fact that this is special ammo, plus it's new, plus it rolls with beacon and destabilizing rounds, you know, there's a lot of things to like about this. So if you haven't got your hands on a Lotus Eater, make sure when it gets into rotation again, you do. Certainly, if you want to spec into a sniper rifle, you could always put on Embraced Identity from the Pale Heart. This will also be able to give you piercing abilities for barriers. If you're just running general content, though, the two most fun weapons, in my opinion, are going to be Age-Old Bond or Graviton Lance. Graviton Lance, of course, because it'll give you a bump to your special and heavy ammo regen for bricks. And then Age-Old Bond, because it's ridiculously easy to control, and it also rolls with Dragonfly and destabilizing rounds. Honorable mention would be the Recluse, and that would probably be it, honestly. But honestly, if you're just running general content, put whatever you like on if you want to stick with Void, so you can take advantage of how we're trying to spec into this build. For the helmet, go ahead and mod your helmet with whatever general mod you need. One heavy ammo finder, because of course we're going to be maining our heavy ammo weapon. A harmonic siphon for your strand weapon if you are going to be running one. Of course, you see Tanasha's is currently equipped for me, so this is kind of a throwaway perk, but even if I had something else in there, it's not really going to matter because my main siphon is going to be, you know, Void, as well as for my my sword. So I guess what I should have said was the kinetic weapon is not going to matter. The kinetic weapon is what I meant is going to be a throwaway, because you're going to be able to generate orbs of power simply by blocking. You're also going to be able to generate threadlings simply by blocking. And then when you do have to pull out Le Monarch for some distance shooting, if you need to, have the Void Siphon on there. So you have two different ways to get your orbs of power, which means you get your abilities back faster. For the Stronghold Gauntlets, first of all, if you have not gone and picked yourself up a set of these, I highly recommend farming for the resource to go and do so. It is also worth noting that you may not get the best roll the first time you get these, so stockpile enough for maybe 2 or 3 tries, pick your best roll, and then spec into it and just do the mods that you have to do to get it to where you want it to be. Clenched Fist, maximize guard stat on equipped swords. You take reduced damage while blocking with the sword. Rapidly damaging targets after blocking shots with a sword grants restoration for a duration determined by the number of shots blocked. So you're going to be able to proc restoration as you are guarding with the sword. The reason this is important is because restoration effects cannot be interrupted by damage. So you might see your health bar all the way maxed the entire time, depending on the activity that you're doing. If you don't, you will see restoration kick in and bring your health back up as you're still blocking shots. When you're outside of combat, you know, obviously these rules don't apply. Also, you take reduced damage while blocking with the sword. So it doesn't matter what kind of damage it is. If it is some that does start to tick your health down a little bit, it's still going to be less than what you're normally used to. I'm thinking like solar damage, like if, you know, a flamethrower enemy throws a bunch of fire at you, you know, that's not going to be something that your sword's just going to magically, you know, block. It's fire. So you're going to burn, but you're going to take reduced damage as long as you are guarding with that. And then, of course, you know, rapidly damaging targets after blocking shots with a sword, procs the restoration that we were just talking about. You'll see the counter on the left-hand side of your screen. You can choose to activate it constantly, which means you're going to run out of ammo faster, or you can keep blocking, just be a little bit more patient, which is what this class is built around, is patience, and then unleash a ridiculous amount of damage on a group of enemies that you've been waiting to return the favor on, let's just say. For armor mods, go ahead and spec whatever you need. I recommend putting on one heavy-handed. We are not going to be relying on our abilities simply because, not as much, I should say. We're not going to be relying on our abilities as much as other Titans builds out there, because our main gameplay is going to be the center of attention from all the enemies you possibly can. So your allies can have quite a bit easier of an experience, whether it's a GM, Master Sector, 50 Wave Onslaught, somewhere where things are going to get hairy and can go from 0 to 110 very quickly. This is where the Stronghold Titan is going to earn its keep on virtually every fire team that finds themselves in those situations. As a result, you're not going to be an orb machine, but you are still going to generate some with your melee, so put your heavy-handed on, go back to guarding. Every 10 seconds, you can punch an opponent in its face, unravel them, create a tangle, pick up the tangle, chuck it across the battlefield at somebody else, and then go back to guarding. Every time you do that, you're going to get your a little bit of tick back on your grapple grenades, so put on impact deduction, and then naturally put on Void Loader so that your Le Monarch reloads even faster. If you don't need Void Loader, if you don't think it's worth your spot, you can always put on a second impact deduction, but you guys got to make that determination for how you want to run this. For the chest armor, spec into whatever general mod that you want. Make sure you put on your 2 damage resistance mods, or 3 if you want. I recommend Solar, Arc, and Void if you're going to do it like that, or just the 2 that you're most likely to see from a given activity. Just make sure you check the threat level when you go into it. And then because we are running a Strand sword, make sure you put on Strand Reserve so you can bump that reserve capacity up even higher. For the leg armor, go ahead and spec into whatever general mod that you need. I highly recommend putting on Recuperation, Innervation, and Absolution. Now, some of you might be looking at this going, well, Durf, I don't think I need Recuperation because I'm going to be getting Restoration every time that I block damage and unleash that torrent of energy at enemies. That is true. However, if you're running this in the Nether arena, you're still going to want a Recuperation because restoration effects are greatly diminished in the Nether arena. And when you're considering the Nether arena for running this, you are going to have to be very patient with it, because any damage that you do take is not going to just automatically come unless you deal additional damage from your sword after blocking. So just keep that in mind. For the Titan Mark, go ahead and spec into Font of Restoration, put on a Bomber, and put on a Reaper. You can put on whatever general armor mod that you need to get the job done, but these 3 are going to be pivotal, because as you're guarding, when you pick up that Orb of Power, that's going to increase your recovery speed. And if you have it sitting at a T5, your first Orb of Power is going to bump you up to a T8, which is a huge jump in the percentage of health recovered per second. So, and then the Bomber is going to simply be another way you're going to be using your barricade regularly. So every time that you cast it, you're going to not only be able to spawn that Orb of Power from your blocking damage that you're going to be doing with your sword, but also reduce the cooldown for your grenade, which means you can launch yourself at a group of enemies and unleash your melee. For the artifact, make sure you spec into whatever weapons you find yourself catering to the most in this first column. You can see I've got Unstoppable Fusion, I got Piercing Sidearms, I got Anti-Barrier Sniper Rifle. Those are probably going to be the 3 main ones because you're going to be kind of playing it off of your Kinetic slot. But also, if you do find yourself wanting to use like a double special setup with special ammo in both your Kinetic and your energy, you may want to spec into the Trace Rifle, or however you want to do it, so that you've got at least 2 champs covered by your weapons by themselves when you go into any activity. In the second column, put on Volatile Marksman for the boost to the weapon damage, which is going to be pair beautifully with Le Monarch. Make sure you put on Unraveling Orbs. Every time you pick up an Orb of Power, your strand weapons are going to deal increased damage to the debuff targets, as well as have Unraveling rounds. And yes, that does include your swords. In the third column, Disruptor Spike and Dielectric. Defeating arc debuff targets grants Bolt Charge. Naturally, we are gambling that we are going to be going into an activity where we might be matchmade against someone who is also running arc. Not against, but with. And when you defeat that arc debuff target, you yourself can get Bolt Charge as long as it is debuffed. Disruptor Spike improves the effects of Exhaust and Sever. Of course, because we're running Strand, anytime we sever a target, it's going to improve the damage that the damage output, or I guess it will reduce the damage output from severed targets. In the third column, Horde Shuttle, of course, because we are running Strand in general, and because it's a fantastic perk. Flashover, you gain maximum bolt charge. You also become amplified. Believe it or not, if you are running with an arc user, you will become amplified periodically throughout your activity. And of course, Maligned Harvest, rapidly applying Volatile causes your next instance of void weapon damage to create a weakening burst. You can enhance this. Applying Weakening provides a small void overshield. You can't go wrong with these three in this column. I don't care if you run an arc or not, you still get the amplified, and I think it's worth the usage here. In the final column, it's going to be a little bit up for debate. I always recommend put Defibrillating Blast on, because even if you're not running arc, if you stun that champ with your weapons, you still get a full stack of Bolt Charge, which means it's going to pair with Flashover. You will become amplified, and of course, your Bolt Charge is going to discharge a Lightning Strike that's going to jolt targets, give you the ability to, again, if it's in a group of enemies and that other enemy or enemies don't die, if you kill those enemies while they are jolted, that is considered defeating a arc debuff target, which also means you can repeat the cycle. Void Flux is going to probably be your best play here. Defeating weakened targets with a void weapon applies Volatile to nearby targets. Powerful targets increase the radius of the explosion. This is probably going to proc approximately once every 3 to 5 seconds, depending on how fast you're firing your Le Monarch. If you do find yourself rocking a fusion rifle or linear fusion rifle, either way, however you want to do it, if you put on Particle Reconstruction, you can benefit from some boost to your damage there. So keep that in mind as well. If you're going to swap either of these out, I would swap out Void Flux before I swap out Defibrillating Blast. So that is the build. Of course, in the description, I'm going to make sure to have a dim link. If you want to connect with me further or like bounce other ideas off of me with this build, feel free to leave me some comments or jump into my Discord and, you can talk with me and bounce ideas off with me directly there. But Banner Titan, I made the statement not too long ago in one of my other videos that Banner Titan is back and it's more fun than ever. Rocking the sword and this build with Stronghold, it's still one of the most, I don't want to use the word forgotten, but if you haven't seen a Stronghold Titan in your fire team for a while, when you do see them in your fire team, just know that those guys are really pulling for you to do the best that you can, because Stronghold is kind of a sacrificial role. Your main goal is to boost the ability of the other players around you to being able to deal as much damage as possible with as little trouble as possible. Now, it might seem counterproductive. That might be a little bit weird if you're just running general content, which is probably why you won't see many Stronghold Titans, unless it's like maybe a 50-wave onslaught. Even then, everyone prefers to be the biggest booms, the brightest flashes, the most busyness on the screen. That's what people strive to be. But get yourself into an endgame activity. Get yourself into a Master Vanguard. Get yourself into a GM. Get yourself into a Master Sector, or an expert this or that, and have it get ridiculously busy, and then put a Stronghold Titan in the mix of it. Virtually everyone is going to welcome that Stronghold Titan. And because this can pair with Banner of War, this Banner of War Titan is by no means slept on, but it is probably forgotten about because swords do pair with it. So, Obviously my recommendation is to try to make this build fit your play style. Just make sure you have the sword that you want. I recommend Lament or Abyssal Edge, but there are others that can run with the flash counter perk. I just really like the ability to do a little bit of area damage as opposed to doing strictly melee. The wave frame allows me to hit enemies behind other enemies instead of having to be right next to them. So if you did find anything helpful in this video, please consider liking and subscribing. If you know a Guardian out there who's looking for an additional way to love their Banner Titan, or a Guardian who doesn't really know what to do with their Strand Titan now that they've finally got one, share this video with them or send them my way. My goal is to help as many people enjoy the game in as many different ways as possible. And of course, I want to say thank you to you guys for supporting the page, all the good vibes, the kind feedback, the suggestions. My goodness, the suggestions that have come in just over the 3 months that I've been really doing this, trying to do this the right way for this year. It's just been incredible. So I want to thank all you guys, of course, my members of the page, and then of course the people in the my Discord. I do talk a lot with the people that are in my Discord. So if that's something that you've been looking for, like that creator connection where hey, I've been thinking about this build, maybe you should try this in the future, I'm all ears. My goal is to help people as much as possible. So if you have suggestions on future builds, feel free to get at me in there. That's my goal of this page and the channel, and it's been doing very well thanks to everyone sharing my stuff and giving me suggestions on what I could do and how I can improve. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over now. I got some more kind of highlights, if you want to call it that. I've also got a couple of videos I'm probably going to put out after this showcasing the power of a Stronghold Titan while they're solo, but that'll be coming out in the future, pretty near future. But so make sure you guys look out for those. But like I said, I appreciate everyone's support. Thanks for checking out the video. I'm going to switch over to the highlights and kind of talk you guys through those. Okay, so the opening for this little highlight reel is not going to be the most flashy. It's mainly just showing you how enemies are going to function around you and how you can get in quick snippets of damage. In this particular run that I did, my teammates were not really the most aggressive ones out there. And, that'll kind of be showcased when you see the scorecard at the end. But mainly the idea is switching between things to deal damage. Now, in here, in the boss room, what I'm going to end up doing is trying to make it so that the boss focuses on me. The beefier enemies try to focus on me. And you can see anytime that there's that little, fuchsia-colored cloud above enemies, it means that they're disoriented. So, initially speaking, when the boss spawns, I'm going to pop my super, go to town, get my damage in early, and then I'm going to go and support my allies. Now, if you are only running with one other person, you're going to have to decide, is this the best time to do that, or do you want to do it at the end, maybe pop your supers together, which most people typically pop their supers at the beginning of a boss encounter anyways. But you can see I've got the boss fully focused on me, and he is getting stunned every so often, not stunned, but disoriented every so often. You see that little purple cloud showcasing right above his head. Of course, he's turned away from me now, but the goal is not to be the flashiest. It's just to keep the enemy that could kill your allies the most focused on you. Some enemies have shields that come and go. This guy never has, it just has a shield all the time that he waves around. So this is going to be much quicker than, the other videos that I have, but mainly you're going to want, especially when you get in a boss room, make sure you know where the boss is, do your part, and draw his attention. And when this guy's back is turned to my allies or me, that's when the damage really ramps up. So thank you guys for checking out this video. You got any questions, comments, let me know. I'll see you guys next time.